Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1208 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today on Defining Diabetes, Jenny Smith and I are going to define intramuscular injections. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year supply of vitamin D. Drink ag1.com/juicebox. If you have type 1 diabetes or are the caregiver of someone with type 1 and a U.S. resident, please go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and complete the survey. Your answers will help to move type 1 diabetes research forward, and it may help you too. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. If you're living with diabetes or are the caregiver of someone who is, and you're looking for an online community of supportive people who understand, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. There are now 50,000 members who are sharing stories and ideas. Go check out this amazing private and free Facebook group. Today's episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, a company that's bringing together people who are redefining what it means to live with diabetes. Later in this episode, I'll be speaking with Mark. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 28. He's 47 now. Then at the very end of the episode, you can hear my entire mini interview with Mark. To hear more stories from the Medtronic Champion community or to share your own story, visit medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox and check out the Medtronic Champion hashtag on social media. Jenny, let's talk about intramuscular injections.
Oh,
known as
one.
IMs, right? Is that how people talk about it?
Yes.
Okay, I'm outside of my depth here, so go.
Well, think about, so right now we take insulin in the sub-Q tissue, right? That layer that kind of sits right underneath the skin. It gets absorbed. That's why our rapid insulin is not rapid, because it doesn't go into your circulating bloodstream and get used right now.
Okay.
IM increases the access to circulating blood because your muscles have lots and lots of blood in them.
Okay.
Right? So if you take an injection directly into muscle, you are going to have quite an increased response to that insulin.
Significant.
Okay. Yes. So why would you want to do this? The biggest reason within, people who have diabetes, the biggest reason to do it is to drive a high blood sugar down fast.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. Healthline says insulin should be injected into the fatty tissue just below your skin. If you inject the insulin deeper into your muscle, your body will absorb it too quickly. It might not last as long, and the injection is usually more painful. This can lead to low blood glucose levels. So you're saying that this fact about how injections work, some people use to their advantage to try to break a high blood sugar.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. And another reason that I have seen it, although it's kind of secondary to just addressing a high blood sugar, is really for really high glycemic food that you haven't pre-bolused for, or right. Getting it right into circulation is absolutely going to help you prevent a big climb in blood sugar.
It's a fairly off-label thing, and I think we usually say this is a ninja level move. Just don't try this on your own.
No.
And
to be quite honest, it's pain.
It hurts. Yeah.
More than, I mean, stings is depending on how deep you get it and where you put it and what you kind of nerve-wise feel like, it stings. This is not something that you're going to do just because you're like, I'm going to eat the whole bag of Skittles today. I'm going to take this with my muscle.
Just jam this in my bicep real quick. Well, so, I mean, it's a thing people asked about, and it's something you know about. Have you ever done it?
I have personally never done it.
Yeah, Arden's never done it. So it's not a thing that is done with a lot of frequency. It's just a thing that some people do. Yeah.
And there might be some certain circumstances where a high blood sugar may it may be beneficial to drive it down a little bit faster. Let's say, it's been high for a while, you have ketones starting, and you really want to get that insulin moving, and it doesn't seem to be. It may be a great reason to do something like this. But again, it's certainly something to do with caution and, to make sure that you're not then, oh, my pump recommended a unit. I'm going to intramuscularly inject 6 units. Please don't do that.
Well, even, do you know, would 1-to-1 even be too much? Like if your numbers, I don't know, let's just make up a number and say you're 300, it won't move. And a unit should bring you back to 100. If you were going to do IM, you wouldn't use the whole unit even, right? Because you'd get a bigger boost out of it. You wouldn't need all that volume. It
would be a good thing to downplay what the calculated amount would have normally been for a sub-Q injection or infusion. If you're going to try an IM injection, then I would downplay the dose, yes, as a starting place.
Yeah. By the way, this is not either of us telling you to try this. It's just, we're just defining the term. You can find NIH articles on it. The injection technique factor, what you don't know or teach can make a difference. That's what that is called. There's plenty of stuff online if you want to learn more about it. But that's what it is, just in case you were wondering. And apparently a lot of people were wondering because here it is on my list. I got to be honest with you, I wouldn't do it. Like, especially, like, I mean, I've now lived through watching Arden go from 2 years old to 20 years old with diabetes, and I can't look backwards and say, oh, there's been a time I should have tried that.
I should have done this here.
Yeah, I don't see that one, but okay. Anyway, we've defined it. Fair enough. That's it. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Just say that twice, just in case.
Great.
Yeah, I ain't doing that one. Let's see. A diabetes diagnosis comes with a lot of new terms, and you're not going to understand most of them. That's why we made Defining Diabetes. Go to juiceboxpodcast.com, up into the menu, and click on Defining Diabetes to find the series that will tell you what all of those words mean. Short, fun, and informative, that's Defining Diabetes. The Diabetes Variable series from the Juicebox Podcast goes over all the little things that affect your diabetes that you might not think about. From travel and exercise to hydration and even trampolines. Juiceboxpodcast.com. Go up in the menu and click on Diabetes Variables. And now my full conversation with Medtronic champion, Mark. Mark, how old were you when you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes?
I was 28.
28. How old are you now?
47.
47. So just about 20 years?
Yeah, 19 years.
What was your management style when you were diagnosed?
I used injections for about 6 months, and then my endocrinologist in the Navy recommended a pump.
How long had you been in the Navy?
Let's see, 8 years up to that point.
8 years.
Yeah.
I've interviewed a number of people who have been diagnosed during service, and most of the time they're discharged. What happened to you?
I was medically discharged. Yeah, 6 months after my diagnosis.
I don't understand the whole system. Is that like honorable?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, if you get a medical discharge, you get a commensurate honorable discharge. I guess there could be cases where something other than that, but that's really how it happens. So it's an honorable discharge but because of medical reasons.
And that still gives you access to the VA for the rest of your life, right?
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Do you use the VA for your management?
I used to up until a few years ago when we moved to North Carolina. It just became untenable. Mm-hmm. Just the rigmarole and process to kind of get all the things I needed for diabetes management. It was far easier just to go through a private practice.
Was it your goal to stay in the Navy for your whole life, your career?
It was. Yeah. In fact, I think a few months before my diagnosis, my wife and I had that discussion about, staying in for the long term. And, we'd made the decision despite all the hardships and time away from home. That was what we loved the most. So that's what made it that much more difficult.
Was the Navy a lifetime goal of yours or something you came to as an adult?
Lifetime goal. I mean, as my earliest childhood memories were flying, being a fighter pilot, and specifically being flying on and off aircraft carriers. So, watching Top Gun in the 80s certainly was a catalyst for that.
You've taken off and landed a jet on an aircraft carrier?
Hundreds of times.
Is there anything in life as exhilarating as that?
No, but there's a roller coaster I rode at I think it was at Cedar Rapids up in Cleveland, Sandusky. and they've got this roller coaster that takes you from 0 to, I think it's like 80 or something. You go up a big hill and you come right back down. So the acceleration is pretty similar, I would say, to a catapult shot.
I'm going to guess you own a Tesla.
I don't.
Oh, okay.
I'm a boring guy. I got a hybrid RAV4. I get made fun of. I get called, my wife says I drive like a grandpa. I'm a 5 miles per hour over the speed limit person, no more than that. So yeah, in the car, I'm boring, Scott.
So you've never felt a need to try to replace that with something else?
You can't replace it. It's irreplaceable.
That's what I thought.
So up until the point where someone, buys me an F-18 or allows me to get inside a 2-seater and fly it, you can't replace it.
How did it make you feel when you saw, or maybe you haven't seen, a gentleman named Pietro has his large aircraft license. He's flying for a major carrier now. He has type 1 diabetes. Does that feel hopeful to you?
Yeah, it does. When I was diagnosed, that wasn't a possibility. The FAA prohibited commercial pilots who had type 1 diabetes. But I think it was 2017 when they changed their rules to allow type 1 diabetics to be commercial pilots. And part of the reason they did that was because of the technology advancements, specifically in pump therapy and pump management. So I don't have any aspirations of going to the commercial airlines, but one of my sons who has type 1 diabetes very much wants to be a commercial pilot. So, in that respect, I'm very hopeful and thankful.
Yeah. Do you fly privately now for pleasure?
I do. Yeah. One of my favorite things to do is fly my kids to the different soccer tournaments I have all over the Southeast U.S. So last week, my wife and I and 2 of our boys flew up to Richmond for their soccer tournaments up there. And Charlie, who's my middle child, has type 1 diabetes. So, if I can combine flying, family, and football in one weekend, to me, I think I've just achieved Valhalla.
So then it sounds to me like this diagnosis was a significant course correction for you. Can you tell me how it affected your dream?
Well, I guess 3 words come to mind. First, it was devastating. Everything I had done in life, everything I'd worked up to that point was just taken away in an instant. And I was not prepared for that at all. The second emotion was, it was scary. I hadn't thought much about life outside the Navy, certainly not life as anything else but a fighter pilot. And Heather and I were getting ready to move to France. I was going to do an exchange tour with the French Naval Air Force. So we were taking French classes. So pretty quickly, I had to reinvent myself. And then probably the most important thing, at the same time that all that was going on, I had to learn how to deal with type 1 diabetes and how to manage it effectively. The third thing that pops into mind, I guess, is challenging. New daily routines I had to establish, first with injections and then eventually, through pump management. And then learning how to count carbs and recognize highs and lows, how my body reacts to blood sugar trends based on exercise and stress and those types of things. And my goal at that time, and it still is today, is to leverage technology and make sure my habit patterns are effective so that I take diabetes management from the forefront to the background.
Have you had success with that? Do you feel like you've made the transition well?
I have. I believe in continuous improvement, so there's always more to do. I will say the technology, since I was diagnosed, specifically with pump management, it's just incredible. It takes less of me intervening, and it's really done by the pump itself and by the algorithms through the CGMs. And to me, again, that should be the goal for everybody, is to not have to focus so much on the daily aspects of type 1 diabetes management. We should let technology do that for us.
What else have you found valuable? I've spoken to thousands of people with type 1 diabetes. The one thing that took me by surprise, because I don't have type 1 myself and my daughter was very young when she was diagnosed, I didn't really understand until I launched this podcast, and then it grew into this kind of big Facebook presence. I heard people say, I don't know anybody else who has type 1 diabetes. I wish I knew more people. But until I saw them come together, I didn't recognize how important it was.
Yeah, I think similarly, I didn't know anyone with type 1 diabetes growing up as an adult up until when I was diagnosed. And then all of a sudden, people just came out of the woodwork. And when CGMs first hit the market, certainly within the last 5 years, it's amazing to me and my family how many people we've noticed with type 1 diabetes simply because you can see the CGM on their arm. I would say a month does not go by where we don't run into someone at a restaurant or an amusement park or a sporting event or somewhere where we see somebody else with type 1 diabetes. And the other surprising aspect of that is just how quickly you make friends. And I'll give an example. We were at a soccer tournament up in Raleigh this past Saturday and Sunday, And the referee came over to my son, Charlie, at the end of the game and said, "Hey, I noticed you were wearing a pump." And he lifted up his shirt and showed his pump as well and said, "I've had type 1 diabetes since I was 9 years old. I played soccer in college. I'm sure that's your aspiration. And I just want to tell you, don't let type 1 diabetes ever stop you from achieving your dreams of what you want to do." And this gentleman was probably in his, late 50s or 60s. So just having that connection and seeing, the outreach and people's willingness to share their experiences, it just means the world to us and just makes us feel like we're part of a strong community.
Yeah. So would you say that the most important things are strong technology, tools, understanding how to manage yourself, and a connection to others?
Yeah. Technology for sure, and knowing how to leverage it. And then the community, and that community is your friends, your family, caregivers, for me, the Medtronic Champions community, all those resources that are out there to, help guide the way, but then help you keep abreast on, the new things that are coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
And to give you hope for eventually, that we can find a cure.
You mentioned that your son wanted to be a pilot. He also has type 1 diabetes. How old was he when he was diagnosed?
So Henry was diagnosed when he was 12 years old. It was just at the start of COVID. We were actually visiting my in-laws in Tennessee. We woke up in the morning and he had wet his bed. And several years before that, we had all 4 of our boys tested for TrialNet. So, predictor of whether or not they were going to develop type 1 diabetes. And Henry and one of his brothers tested positive for a lot of the indicators. So we always kind of had an inclination that there was a high degree of possibility he would develop it, but we always had it in the back of our mind as well. And so when that event happened at the beginning of COVID, we had him take his blood sugar on my glucometer, and it was over 400. And so right away, we knew that without even being diagnosed properly by an endocrinologist, that he was a type 1 diabetic. So we hurried home to get him properly diagnosed in Charlottesville. And then we just started the process, first grieving, but then acceptance and, his eventual becoming part of the team that nobody wants to join.
How old is he now?
Yeah, he's 15 years old now.
When's the first time he came to you and said, "Is this going to stop me from flying?"
Almost immediately. So like me, he always had aspirations of flying. In fact, he, out of all 4 boys, wanted to be in the military. And that was a difficult part of the conversation, and maybe something that we don't talk about as a community. But there are some things you cannot do as a type 1 diabetic, and that's a hard fact of life. And unfortunately, joining the military is one of those hard and fast things. You cannot join the military as a type 1 diabetic. So that was very difficult for him and for me and my wife to get over. Then we also started talking about being a commercial pilot. And so I saw that same excitement in his eyes because, like me, he can be in an F-18 or a 737 or a Cirrus SR-20 that I fly and be just as happy. Yeah. So he still has that passion today and still very much plans to eventually become a commercial pilot.
I appreciate you sharing that with me. Thank you. You have 4 children. Do any others have type 1?
They do. My oldest twin, Henry, has type 1 diabetes, and my middle son, Charlie, has type 1 diabetes as well.
The boys are twins.
The oldest 2 are twins. One has type 1 diabetes. My middle son, who is not a twin, has type 1 diabetes.
I see. Is there any other autoimmune in your family?
There isn't. I'm really the only person in my family or my wife's family that we know of with any sort of autoimmune disease, certainly type 1 diabetes. So unfortunately, I was the first to strike it rich and unfortunately pass it along to 2 of my sons.
But celiac, thyroid, anything like that?
Nothing. We're really a pretty healthy family. So this came out of nowhere for myself and for my 2 sons.
That's really something. I appreciate your time very much, and I appreciate you sharing this with me. Thank you very much.
Anytime, Scott.
Learn more about the Medtronic Champion community at medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox or by searching the hashtag Medtronic Champion on your favorite social media platform. If you're not already subscribed or following in your favorite audio app, please take the time now to do that. It really helps the show. And get those automatic downloads set up so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.